Hey guys, welcome back to Vince Vale Custom. So today we're going to do a repair on this fence that goes to the PCS Purgatory statue. Now, there's a little bit of an issue with this. I mean, it looks fairly simple where you just kind of attach this fence up back there and you're done. But the issue is, from what I understand, is these pieces actually connect into the back of the base. So if you were to put this on here and you were, say, a little bit off, you know, like it goes here, it wouldn't go in correctly. Now the problem is this is a 1/3 scale. So if they were to try to send me the base with this fence in the box, it would be a crazy amount of money, you know, going back and forth. So we talked it over and we decided that what we're going to try to do is I'm going to try to repair it the best way I can. And then from there, we are going to send it back and then hopefully everything works out pretty well. It's not a 100% guarantee it will work, but I'm going to try my best. I'm going to explain on how I'm going to repair this. Now, normally what I do is I would have I would drill a hole in here and I would drill a hole in here and then I would add a rod, but if I had the base I would sort of line it up correctly and make sure that this locks in there pretty well. But sadly we can't do that. So what I'm going to do is we're going to do it a little bit of a different way. I still have to secure it though because I can't just glue this on and I can't just put a rod in there. So what I'm planning on doing for this project is just glue this in and make sure I line everything up correctly. Well, I'm going to have to do it sort of off camera because I have to get in there with my magnifying glasses and make sure everything goes. So I'm going to have my BSI gel glue and then I also have my Instaset here. And what I'll do is I'll squeeze some glue on there, I'll line this up correctly, and then what I'll do is I'll let it dry, and then once it's kind of cured up, I'm going to Dremel out this area here. Or maybe I'll Dremel out the back. I'm not really sure which way it faces. It doesn't really matter. I'm going to so what I'll do is think of it as you glue it in, you make sure it's lined up correctly, you make sure it lines up exactly how it sort of broke, and then what I'll do is I'll Dremel out here and I'll Dremel out here, and I'll put a rod in there with Aves, and then I'll rebuild this area. What I might do though is because this is at a very weird spot of cracking, I might add a little bit of extra in there and just to kind of secure it. And we'll kind of go over that, but that's the best way I think I can do this. If this was broken in like 3 parts, you know, and it was all cracked up, then I don't know how I would be able to do this without the base. But maybe what I could have done is I could have told the client, okay, put it in the base. If it was broken in like 3 parts, tell them to use super glue, kind of glue it in, make sure it's going in and out of the base, then send it to me, and hopefully it doesn't break anymore, and I could Dremel it out and rod it up and fix it. But with this one, we're going to do it this way. And I think it will work as long as I get this lined up as correctly broken as possible, and it's good it didn't crack up and break. Yeah, so you see, sometimes these repairs are fairly easy where I won't need all the items, but sometimes with this that it's going into the base, it might work. So the other fear of it is, like, say I do this right and I do it, but say it's a little bit of a hair off, like just a little bit of a hair off or something, and then they try to put it in the base and they try to kind of wiggle it in to kind of stretch it, then all of a sudden they can break and they can snap. It's just a downside with some repairs if you can't have the elements where things connect. You know, if this piece up here was broken or this piece up here was broken, it's different because I could kind of go in there and I could fix it and I do the best I can to repair it. But since this is connecting into something else, that's the problem. Yeah, so I might kind of build this up a little bit and then kind of Dremel it down and kind of just keep working. As far as touching up the paint, that's fairly straightforward. I could kind of match it up the best I can. And even if you can't match up this perfectly, you can sort of blend out a little bit of an area and kind of blend out your repair to other areas, and they can make it look uniformed, you know? Because there's no other fence areas on the base that need to match this. So, say you did this area and you matched up and you hit it and it's a little bit darker, you could kind of go in here and kind of hit these areas a little bit darker, and you could kind of hit these a little bit darker, and you could kind of uniform your repair. So that's always something to keep in mind. But, alright, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to get my magnifying glasses set up, which I use my headgear like this. I'm going to try to do this off camera and just kind of put some glue. It's going to be a little bit tricky. The way I usually do something like this is I kind of make sure I'm lining this up correctly. I'm not putting it on backwards. Make sure I got it the correct way. What I'll do is I'll grab some wood, a little bit of a wood dowel thing, and what I'll do is I'll dip it in the Instaset, and then what I'll do is I'll have that on the side, have everything ready, so this way I put the glue, line it up, and hit it with the Instaset real quick and lock it in place. And like I said, if I have to, if I feel that, you know, there's not enough glue there, and if I try to Dremel this out, and this kind of break off on me again, what I might do is after the Instaset kind of dries up and goes away, I might put a little extra glue around the edges and let it cure up again, and then go back in and Dremel this out. That's just the way this is going to work, and it's the best way to repair this and make sure it's sturdy. So I even might, I would like to kind of Dremel this out now and Dremel this out now and go there, which I might do. I'm trying to, you know, like I kind of brainstorm with this stuff, trying to think out the best way, because if you do hit it with glue, and you do hit this with glue, and then you try to Dremel this area out, and then all of a sudden, you know, it's not really holding it too well, you break it off, and then all of a sudden you got glue here, and you got glue here, and then you try to glue it again, and you're starting to push this piece down because you're putting layers of glue between stuff. So maybe what I'll do is I'll go in the garage and I'll Dremel this out and Dremel this out. But I got to Dremel out in the point where I don't ruin this edge or that edge, so it's a little bit tricky. I'll figure it out. So once I figure that out, what I'm going to do when I get in the garage, because I got to make sure I don't snap anything, we'll come back, I'll show you my plan, and then we'll go from there. Alright, so I went in with my magnifying glass, I looked this over, and after some thought, I decided let's Dremel out a little chunk down here, and let's Dremel out here, and then I'm going to put some glue in here. Hopefully that will, I'm going to line it up as best as I can. I'm going to let that kind of cure up, because even though you put some of this gel glue there and you hit it with the Instaset, you still need a little bit of time to let it cure. Even though it says 5-minute cure time, which it does, I still like to put this aside for a couple hours, because later what I'll do is when I mix up some Aves and I work on a project or two, I'll cut a rod and we'll shove some Aves in there and we'll kind of lock it in just to kind of get it locked in place. And then once that's sort of locked in place, we can start rebuilding it and we can handle it more. You know, when you put a dab of glue and you hold a piece like this heavy and it's going to hold up this whole fence, it's not really going to be secured. We want to make sure we rod it up the best we can and, you know, hold it. So I got my magnifying glasses on. I'm going to turn off the camera. I'm going to try to get in here as close as I can. I'm going to get everything set up, because with gel glue and Instaset, you don't want to sit there and do it and play with it, and then you put on Instaset, but you didn't put Instaset really correctly and it pops off. Then you got to scrape off the glue, and then all of a sudden you're losing your lining. You want to make sure everything is ready so you can dab the glue, dab this, the Instaset hits there, hold it, and go from there. If I have to, if I feel that it's still not working a little bit, I'd rather get glue around the edges and chop off the glue later than to get glue in the middle. So I'm going to try to get the glue around the edges so the inside stays nice and clean for a rod and A's later. So just a matter of making sure this is secured. So let me get this on, come back, we'll look at it, and then hopefully later when I mix up some A's today, we can start going step by step. Alright, so I went ahead and I got it glued on. A little bit tricky. I had to actually use some of my little eyeliner tip tools to kind of get in there and kind of get the glue and kind of get it around and work that out, because like what happened is I hit it with the wood dowel and it sort of hit this area here but didn't get anything underneath, so I really wanted to make sure that Instaset sits. So I'll kind of get in a little bit closer and we'll show you what's going on. So you can see the glue is kind of really messy around the edge. Let's flip this without cracking it. You can kind of see how the glue is kind of around the edges like that. That'll get chopped up down there, but it may look like it's offline, but it's not. It's just that the glue is just sticking out and it's squeezed. But I pretty much lined it up the best I could. I kind of made sure around the edges, I made sure everything's lined up. It's just that the glue is kind of around the outside of it to kind of hold it in place. So I would rather have a metal rod in here with Aves securing this the best I can and then chop out the glue. I always feel that glue is good for certain specific things, like maybe holding up a finger or like a sash or something smaller, or even stuff like this. But when you're actually putting something into a base and you're going to kind of like wiggle it, or it's got to sit in something and hold something up, I don't like glue on the item. So once I get this area inside here with a rod and Aves and that cures up, what I'll do is I'll Dremel around and get all that glue out of there and then rebuild the area around there with Aves. And even if I have to thicken it up a little bit, you know, like just kind of thicken up the edge and kind of bring it down a bit, I would rather do that than not, you know, just have the glue. I just feel that glue is not good for a repair like this, just to hold it on, but I feel that a rod with Aves and rebuilding this is going to make it more secure. Now, as all repairs, is things going to make it like 1000% repaired and secured. Honestly, the way this item is, I'm actually shocked that they didn't put rods in this too. Personally, something like this that is going to be holding up this stuff and you have something here, I would think rods should have been actually casted in this item. You know, maybe they thought that, oh, okay, since we have all these other supports here, it won't be a big deal. But of course, you can see this snapped already. You know, that's just the way it is. Some factories and some companies will say, hey, we want rods in there, we want everything secured, and some people don't. So that's kind of where we're at. So I'm going to put this aside. I'll come back a few hours later once I'm starting to work on some stuff, and then if I have any extra A's, we'll pop it in there with a rod. We'll let it cure up for the night. I come back tomorrow, and then we can start chopping this up, rebuilding it, and then after that we repair it. Alright, so it's probably been about an hour or so, and I'll try to turn this over, give you guys an idea. See the glue, it all kind of cured up, and it all got funky and white. You know, even this gel glue and super glue, it does kind of leave this nasty residue. But like I said, that's all going to come off anyway, so it's not a big deal. So I have a brass rod. This is going to go in there to help support this, and then we have some A's that I mixed up. So this is still fairly soft. So I figured it's better to kind of utilize this now while I can. So I'm going to take a little bit of a damp safety solvent with my paintbrush and just get in there and make sure that there's no dust. Kind of clean it up a bit. Because when you use a Dremel tool and you kind of cut that stuff, you do have a little bit of a dust. So it's better to take that out. There was a little bit of glue kind of by the crack there. I kind of had to go back in there with the Dremel tool and clean that up. Just to make sure I can get the rod in there. So basically what we do is just be careful. Don't try to, you know, push it in and snap it. I'm using a little bit of safety solvent on the tool so it sort of doesn't stick. So I'll make sure we get this in there. The rod is for support. Think of it as like, you know, the bones in your body. You have, you know, bones, and then you have meat, and then you have skin. So it's kind of the same thing. You're kind of creating a armature to help support it. You don't want to put a super thick rod in there, because what happens is you won't have any A's, which is kind of like your muscle, you know. So something like this is pretty good. Something too thin, thinner than this would probably be not enough. But so you got to kind of think of what you're filling in. If it was a bigger piece, like a leg, then you use a thicker rod, you know, something maybe like that thick of metal for the rod. But since we got a little bit of a piece here, we have this rod. So what I like to do is get the eaves in there. So you can see how this is kind of warped and bent. I'm going to try to push this down a bit, just so I don't kind of wobble. And basically what I want to do is I want to try to get this rod as centered as I possibly can. I don't want to push it all the way down to the resin, but I don't want it sticking out. And that should be pretty good. So making sure that, you know, there's no air bubbles and stuff, so you can see the eave sort of starts to squeeze up around it, and that's what we want. So we want to make sure we're getting that eaves in every point. So from here, I'll try to get a little bit closer for you guys. We're going to try to sort of rebuild it a little bit. Now you could do it in layers. You could throw the eaves in there and kind of leave it alone, and then the next day sort of build on top of it, because eaves sticks to eaves. But for this one, I want to try to sort of build out this side. So when I drum out the other side, this is a little bit, you know, sturdier. And I don't care if at this point if I am getting the eaves and the red eaves all over on the item, because we're going to touch it up and blend it all out. Like I said, we're going to maybe build up a little bit. And the good thing about this fence is if you mess up a little bit, or you kind of do a little extra or whatever, it'll look good as long as you blend it out with paint. So like say, you you know, this was a little bit cracked. So say, like, just for instance, I don't know, we'll grab a X-Acto blade, and say you know you're kind of messing up and you're not getting perfect. You can add a, you know, you could add a little crack to it or something if you really wanted to. As long as, like I said, as long as you blend it up and you make it look good, you probably won't even notice. So that's why I want to make sure some of this is sort of thicker around this edge too. I'd rather it look a little bit off, I guess, but still be secured. We're going to try to make it as clean as possible. So I got to kind of turn it a bit. Camera. There we go. I want to make sure when I turn it I don't snap anything. Where is my towel? Or we can even use a rough piece of sandpaper. That might work. So what we do is we take our sandpaper, we sort of try and create that texture that's there. I mean, I'm never going to match that texture 100%, but at least it creates something. That's a little bit of a texture. Where's my towel? Here's my towel. So usually towels, and like, you know, if you have some kind of towel or something, or you can sort of create that texture. And then you can also, I mean, if you can't create the texture with the Aves, you can create texture with paint. Like if you have a thicker paint or a primer, you can sit there and, you know, do exactly what I was doing with the towel with paint. You know, and if it's thick acrylic paint or whatever, you can get away with it. So where's this tool? And if somehow you build too much and it's messed up, you can go in there and you can Dremel it out and rebuild. It's all about making sure it's secured. So we gotta keep turning this around. Alright, so at this point I gotta get in there a little bit closer, but you get the idea what I'm doing with this. So I'm gonna turn off the camera, this way I can turn it up and I can actually detail a little bit more to try to make this part here a little bit more flush going across. And we'll let it cure and we'll come back tomorrow and we'll kind of flip it, Dremel a little bit of it out, build up that area, and keep going. Alright, so it is the next day and I went in the garage and I went and I Dremeled out all that glue around the edge, and I Dremeled out so you can see where the actually red A's is. So we go back over here, you can see, took out some there, and this is the front of this. We have a little bit of sanding to do, kind of clean it up a bit, but it should work out pretty well. So I got some Aves. I was working on another project, so it's kind of starting to harden up a bit. Not to the point where I can't do this, but at least we got some Aves to work on this. So basically, we're just going to go around the item, thicken it up, like I said, maybe do a little sanding, and if by chance, you know, because it's very hard to match the texture I could come as close as possible, but okay, so once again, I'm going to have to stop the camera because I got to get in closer. Can't do this with this over my head, and if I do it to the side, you won't even see what I'm doing. So, but you can see I'm pretty much throwing this eaves around there, but you can see how it's kind of squeezing up around the edges, so I got to kind of take that out a bit. And go from there. Alright, so I'm going to turn off the camera, get in a little bit closer, do this. We'll come back tomorrow once it's all cured up. Maybe do a little sanding to kind of, you know, work it out a bit. And then just see how things look. And then what we'll do is we'll start painting it up, touching it up. And then if I feel that it's not perfect or we're starting to see it, because it's always hard to see paint with eaves next to it. Like if I was able to prime the whole thing, I could see it a little bit better. But once we start throwing some paint on there, we might find some stuff I have to tweak. So I'm just going to keep going ahead. So we'll come back tomorrow once it's cured up and see what we need to do. Okay, so it is the next day, and I pretty much sanded some of this down. I kind of grinded a little bit with the Dremel tool just to kind of mark it up a bit. Something like this with eaves, you really don't need to sit there and you know, like prime it. Eaves bonds pretty well with paints, so small stuff like this, it works pretty good. So what I'm going to do right now is I have Tamiya Mecha Colors Dark Steel, which is, this is kind of like a dark steel, and then we have a Vallejo rust texture. So I'm thinking that this might come close to it. But for right now, what we're going to do, see, this is kind of like a brownish rust that they put on there, and I'm thinking this is kind of close to it. We're going to find out. I need to probably mix this up a little bit more. It's been sitting a while. But for right now, what we'll do is we'll just get a coat of the dark steel on here. Now, the dark steel is a little bit, so I'm thinking maybe we got to mix some of this, a little bit of this rust color into it, darken it up a little. And like I said, you know, you sort of start to blend it out a little bit on certain other areas. Kind of just get it going. Now, usually paints are brighter when they're wet, and if they are a little bit bright, what you want to do is you want to go in with like a probably a Vallejo matte varnish afterwards at the end and kind of dull it down. That's also a possibility if it's too bright with the metallic, because they might have not just put, well, it looks like it's sort of a metallic on here. It's definitely got all like that wash of rust on a lot of it. Okay, so it's a good coat there. Let's sort of so this is a little bit too brown, so we're gonna have to mix some lighter color in it. Let's see. Thinking a little bit of a raw sienna. Kind of give it a little bit of a lighter color. Let's see if this sort of kind of gives it that rust look. Yep, that's kind of what I was looking for. This is what I say when you do. You can kind of just blend it around, you know, kind of make it look like it belongs all over the piece. Not really exactly sure what the factory used, you know, it's kind of hard to always match factory 100%, but if you sort of blend it out and you hit it in certain areas, you know, to kind of hit these colors a little bit over here, a little bit up there. Now I'm looking at it in the light to sort of see where they threw a lot of the color in, kind of turn it around. Like I said, you know, if you repair your item too, and you know what, you're like, you know what, I like the fence, but I don't like it. I want it to be a little bit darker, or I want it to be a little bit more rustier. You can always just, if this is the only item that's kind of broken, and this is the only item that's going on the base that has this kind of paint, you can have fun with it. You know, there's no rule says that you have to keep it factory. You can always brighten it up and make better. You know, maybe you want these pieces to stick out a little bit more, and these are maybe a white metal, you know, stuck into a darker metal fence, or you know, maybe you want to add more rust, or even if you wanted to, you can add like little moss growing around it, like it's got moss and dirt on it, so you can do stuff like that. But all in all, that's pretty straightforward. You know, there's little spots here and there. I gotta let it dry a bit, and then what I'll do is I'll hit it with some Vallejo matte varnish and kind of get it cleaned up a bit. Just actually, it's kind of drying all right though. Actually, I don't even really think I need to do any, but yeah, as far as paint wise, this is easier to repair paint wise, because like I said, it's messy and you could kind of run with it, whereas the repair is the harder part. You always got to just make sure you're doing, you know, exactly the repair to fit. But all in all, that's it. I think that's done. So all I'm going to do is let that set up, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to let it dry, and then I'll hit it with some Vallejo flat varnish, kind of like maybe, or maybe a little bit of satin, because this is a little bit shinier than some of what I did there. So maybe it needs to just pop a little bit more. Yeah, so what I'll do is I'll kind of just like do a dusting on whatever Vallejo varnish or satin I do on this, and kind of just bring it together. But all in all, I like it. It looks pretty good. I'm happy with it. So there you go. That is the repair. Hopefully you guys liked the video. Hopefully it gives you guys some ideas on how to repair it. I really won't know if this is going to fit in the base 100% until I send it out to the client. But this is kind of what we came up with. And if for some odd reason it breaks again or it doesn't fit or something, we'll have to come up with a solution where it breaks, he puts it into the base, and then he glues it and then sends it to me, and then I kind of just fix it that way. But I think it should go in there pretty well because I lined it up as best as I could with the crack. I just thickened it up a bit, that's all. A little bit thicker around there, but that is fine because it's got to stay in. It's got to be secured. So there you go. That is the repair for the Purgatory fence. Let me know what you guys think. Thanks for watching, and we'll be back with some more videos.